Hello, today is World Refugee Day and we welcome you all from Austria, Cameroon, Canada, Egypt, France, Germany, Ireland, Jordan, Nepal, Nigeria, Qatar, Romania, Spain, the USA and the United Kingdom to raise awareness of the crucial role of participatory arts as rehabilitative support for refugees. I'm delighted to find that my London Borough of Wandsworth runs an arts festival of sanctuary, and there are cities of sanctuary all over the UK. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, reported at the end of last year that over 117 million people worldwide were forcibly displaced due to persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violation, and events seriously disturbing the public order. Conflicts from Sudan to Gaza and Myanmar are creating new displacement. And last month, that figure rose to 120 million. Over 6 million are asylum seekers. That is, they have applied for asylum and await decision as to whether they will be granted refugee status. And over 36 million are living as refugees. UNHCR warns against apathy and inaction. Our speakers today, who all do remarkable work, will explain how they use arts for people facing the trauma of displacement, the after effects of torture, and more, from countries such as Bosnia-Herzegovina, Georgia, Colombia, Israel and Palestine, Ireland, Sierra Leone, Sudan, Iran, Sri Lanka, Congo, Eritrea, Nigeria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and they also work to prevent re-traumatization in a strange country. They bring vital help at all stages of the refugee journey, either locally in camps or from arrival to longer term. How vital that support is in terms of psychological, social and behavioral impact can be seen on the screen now, thanks to the World Health Organization's Arts and Health Programme supporting the mental well-being of forcibly displaced people. Christopher Bailey, the WHO Arts and Health Lead, is in Ukraine today, but has pre-recorded our opening interview with Cornelius Katona, the Royal College of Psychiatrists Lead on Refugee and Asylum Mental Health, and Almir Coulter, Director of Counterpoint Arts. You then hear the various ways art support is offered in detention camps, asylum hotels, hostels, hotel accommodation, or community centres, university, encouraging refugees to express their thoughts, to connect through storytelling with or without interpreters. Through writing, participatory arts and drama, co-produced performances and physical therapy, refugees are enabled to rebuild confidence, identity and sense of belonging in a safe and welcoming community. The original idea of these Global Arts for Brain Health webinars, inspired by our late patron, Baroness Greengross, co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Dementia, was to raise awareness of the rehabilitative role of culture and creativity for people with early-stage dementia. Dr. Hanan Khalil has that experience as a Global Brain Health Institute and Atlantic Fellow. But by and large, the communities we shall be hearing about embrace natural care for their elders with dementia. This webinar is being recorded, and with the transcript, we shall include links to resources and other work in this field. Our overall chair is Alexandra Coulter, founding director of the National Centre for Creative Health, who will introduce the keynote session, after which Professors Cornelius Katona and Rachel Tribe chaired 2 sessions, with a musical interlude in between, the Unknowns, the Hear Me Out refugee band, performing Hope for Humanity. And finally, Project Encounter, the drama for refugees partnership between Maria Arberg's Project Europa and University of Kent, whose student involvement ensures legacy. Alex launched the National Centre for Creative Health in 2021. A Director of Arts and Health South East for 14 years, she provided the Secretariat for the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing, and project managed its 2-year inquiry and 2017 Creative Health Report, the seminal resource to which we all refer. Her culture, health and wellbeing international conferences raise awareness the world over. She also helped set up the Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance and the Lived Experience Network, Alex, it's an honor to welcome you as chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. I'm absolutely delighted to be here on this at this event on World Refugee Day. And congratulations, Veronica, because we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. And it's very exciting to be able to welcome our first panel, which is pre-recorded because, as Veronica said, Christopher Bailey, Arts and Health Lead for the World Health Organization, is in Ukraine today and isn't able to join us. We are actually joined by Professor Cornelius Katona, who is going to be in the video. He is Medical and Research Director of the Helen Bamber Foundation and the Royal College of Psychiatrists Lead on Refugee and Asylum Mental Health. And he is also joined in the video by Almir Kolzik, Director and Co-founder of Counterpoint Arts. We will hear from Counterpoint Arts later, but Almir isn't here in person. So I'm going to hand over to Veronica.
Welcome everybody on World Refugee Day. I'm Cornelius Katona. I'm a psychiatrist by trade. I'm the Royal College of Psychiatrists Lead on Refugee and Asylum Mental Health. And I also work as Medical Director at the Helen Bamber Foundation, which is a charity that supports survivors of extreme human cruelty, such as torture and human trafficking. And it's a real pleasure to be able to speak to Almir Kojic and to Christopher Bailey today. So Almir, can you tell us a bit about the work that you do?
Of course. Thank you, Cornelius. So I'm Almir. I'm co-founder and director at Counterpoint Arts. We are an arts organization engaging with experiences of displacement and migration. We are based in London, but we're working nationally and internationally. And our practice is about developing arts and cultural programs to do with displacement and with experiences of displacement and migration. We have a range of different programs that include Refugee Week Festival, which is one of the UK's or world's biggest festivals engaging with refugees. We have lots of our work is about supporting artists from refugee and migrant backgrounds to develop their work and practice in the UK. And we work a lot with mainstream and other arts and cultural organizations and communities on programming, commissioning artists, and showcasing the voices and stories of refugees and migrants in a whole range of different programs. I should just also add that literally every aspect of our work is done collaboratively with others, and that's a very important aspect of our work that helps us reach a greater impact than we as a small organization would be able to do by ourselves.
Thank you. And Christopher, perhaps I could start by asking you what you're going to be doing on World Refugee Day.
Certainly, Cornelius, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm the Arts and Health Lead at the World Health Organization, and on World Refugee Day, I'm actually going to be in the Ukraine working with community groups, NGOs, and the government on the uses of the arts in a health context in a conflict zone, and that will include internally displaced people as well. We also have been working quite extensively in refugee situations around the world.
Thank you. I guess that there's one important commonality there, particularly at this time, which is how organizations like those that you both work with, how you rise to the occasion when new conflicts arise and people are newly displaced. I wonder if either of you would like to make some comment on that.
I'm happy to start. Basically, the main focus of our work is on supporting and working with artists who are coming from a whole range of different settings. Some of them are new to the country, some of them have been around for a while. And what we try to do is to respond to their needs and to see how best we can support them in developing their artistic practice. Of course, it's not always the first need that people need addressed when they come to the UK, because there are all sorts of practical, logistical, and other more pressing issues that they need support with. But we are basically there to try and support people to develop their work and to try and develop new networks, to to start practicing the art forms in whatever way they find suitable and possible in this context. But also, one new element of our work that we've been developing over the last few years has been to do with mental health and looking how artistic practice enables people to improve their mental health and to benefit from engaging in art activities in various settings.
Thank you. Christopher, I wonder if you might respond to that. I mean, I'm very much aware of the work that the World Health Organization does, for example, in terms of mental health first aid. And I'm just wondering how artistic activity interacts with that, and taking Almir's point, how one prioritizes between those very urgent practical needs on the one hand, and perhaps slightly longer term thinking in terms of artwork and involving people in more positive things.
Well, indeed. And in fact, I've been working with our mental health department at WHO on creating a toolkit, a set of materials for artists to help triage in a situation, an emergency situation of any sort, and included in that material are also some guides for self-care as well, because oftentimes artists are not necessarily trained in mental health or emergency response. So to have a clear idea up front about how they should engage, when they should engage, and what to be careful of, not just with the people that they're serving, but with themselves as well. I think there are some basic things that can be done in the first instance to make the situation a little more friendly, a little less frightening to help. But in most of the groups that I work with, they characterize themselves as second responders, not first responders. That when you are in crisis and you have been recently displaced, and your main concern is going to be a roof over your head, medical care for yourself and your family, food, clothing, security, and anything else could actually be a triggering distraction. But once those basic needs are taken care of, you have shelter, you have food, you have security, you have medical attention, that's actually when the enormity of the situation begins to weigh down on you, and you begin to reflect on what you've lost and begin to feel the first inklings of anxiety about the uncertainty of what's to come. And that's when I think an arts intervention can begin to be useful in a profound way of not only easing some of those concerns, but helping you cope and manage the situation that you're in, and imagining what are the choices for the future. I mean, I saw a wonderful example when I was working with Ukrainian refugees in Moldova at the beginning of the war, where the children were visibly distressed. They were sullen, they had dark circles under their eyes, they clearly hadn't slept in a long time or slept well. And in that case, I was working with a group called Red Noses International, a group of healthcare clowns. And when they began their clowning routines, the children were at first hesitant. They didn't know what to make of it. And when one began to laugh, it gave permission for the other children to begin to laugh. And it began to ripple almost like a viral wave. And to see these children who clearly were in distress to suddenly laugh like children again, it was like a rain falling on a desert and the spring flowers immediately blooming in the form of smiles. And then the mothers began to cry because they hadn't heard that sound in weeks. It was a remarkable event.
That's a wonderful story. Can I just come back on that? And Vince, I'm wondering how, Almir, how that works in terms of the work you're doing with people who have been displaced very far. because one thing that I find myself faced with quite often is that it's very difficult to sustain recovery, that people may appear to improve, but when even quite a small new crisis happens, perhaps bad news from home, perhaps some setback in their legal case, working towards sanctuary, then it's as if things are back to where they were a long time ago. And it's quite difficult for the non-clinicians to deal with that. And sometimes there are quite serious safeguarding issues that need to be dealt with. So, I mean, I just wonder how you and your colleagues deal with that sort of thing.
Thank you. So, well, absolutely what you said is also something we have seen through our experience, that healing process is non-linear, that there's no one clear trajectory of people engaging with an activity or whatever it is, and then suddenly improving, and that becomes a very clear upward trajectory. Things change all the time. And I think one big issue when we talk about refugees and asylum seekers is that due to the experiences they've had, they're very likely to have some sort of stress, some sort of anxiety, some sort of trauma that they are bringing with them. And then when they come to a hostile environment like we have currently in the UK, where the system is designed in such a way to make that whole process even more difficult, that means there's so many potential triggers to make that situation much worse. And that's a really challenging context to work in for anyone who wants to support this group. One of the research findings suggests that refugees are 5 times more likely to develop mental health issues than, for example, general UK population because of this context. How you respond to that is, I don't think there's one way of responding to it. There's, a whole range of things that need to be addressed, and arts certainly can play a role in that, but it cannot be the only vehicle and the only means of support for people experiencing these challenges. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that there's something that you both said which resonates very much for me about how that is difficult for the individual asylum seekers and refugees concerned, but it's also difficult for the people working with them. And I was just wondering about your approaches, and I was going perhaps to start with you, Christopher, in terms of the WHO approach to staff support, to helping people who are themselves quite often, certainly in my experience, find it quite difficult to deal with a hostile environment, to deal with people who are not on a linear trajectory. So it's dealing with the clients themselves, but also dealing with the difficulties they face. So how can we best support staff in turn to support and work with, help the client journey?
Well, in our case, we've actually developed, as I mentioned, some tools and some training to help people who are doing these sorts of interventions. And they can be small things like learning how to use breath to ease anxiety if they feel overwhelmed, encouraging people to talk to colleagues and not keep it in. There a whole series of basic tips that are part of this package that may seem obvious when you read them, but in the moment, your reaction may not allow you to do these practical things. But I think in terms of one of the things I've noticed in the most successful programs is that it's more than just entertaining the refugees, right? That does bring relief and escape and connection, and it can sometimes be very moving. And the effects of it can last more than just the performance itself. We have measures that have actually demonstrated this. But the most sustained approaches are ones where the groups are taught how to use these expressive practices themselves. So it's more than just a performance or an exhibition. It's actually giving permission and a few tools for people, if they so choose, to actually learn how to express their issues. One of my touchstone quotes is from Carl Jung, who said, "Loneliness is not the absence of people. Loneliness is the inability to express what matters to you most." And if we can give people those tools, it can ease that loneliness. Fundamentally, one of the core parts of being a human being is the search for meaning. And when a acutely negative event happens, like displacement, finding a meaning in that can be extremely challenging, but it's also necessary to cope with it and then eventually thrive. And it can be something as simple as, I mentioned the clowns a few minutes ago, seeing the clowns give out little soap bubble kits to the kids and just letting them blow bubbles. There was something about that, the delicateness of the bubble, the beauty, the simple beauty of it, but then it breaks and it's okay. Teaching them how to juggle plastic plates on a stick. And at first they couldn't do it and the plate would fall, but it was plastic and it didn't break. And in this world of clowning, making a mistake is not tragic, it's funny. And then when you get it right, it's a moment of celebration. So actually dealing with the uncertainty and imbalance of the world and gaining mastery over it, and even in failure, coming together and joining in a spirit of good cheer and mutual support was, for these kids, a tonic.
And maybe another couple of things that you mentioned that might be worth drawing out are, it's not just finding the meaning, but expressing the meaning, and perhaps it's doing so non-verbally as well as verbally. I wonder,
Exactly.
Amir, what you think about that.
Oh, absolutely. So there's a few things that come to mind immediately. So one of which is, we, for example, also have a program called No Direction Home that's about comedy, training up asylum seekers, refugees to develop their stand-up skills, and then they go on and perform, sometimes alongside very established comedians in all sorts of different venues. And we find that comedy, as Christopher was just saying, can be a really empowering tool for coming to terms with and processing all sorts of information and experiences. Of course, it's different from, again, people we work with would have been here in this country for a while, so they wouldn't be necessarily facing those very acute crisis points, but they would definitely be facing some crisis points. There's also this thing of that I wanted to mention, that last year we developed a report, and I believe it's one of the first reports on arts, refugees, and mental health in the UK context. We developed it in collaboration with the Bering Foundation, who have been awarding grants for creative activities to do with mental health since 2020. And last year, they invited us to collaborate on developing this report that's called Creatively Minded and Refugees. And in that report, we profiled 12 different organizations, case studies, that use different art practices to engage with refugees and asylum seekers as a way of supporting their mental health. And within it, there was lots of learning, lots of new findings that we found fascinating, one of which is definitely this thing, that the importance of creating spaces that are beyond language, that lots of people who are new to this context would struggle with language anyhow, but even if that is not the case, there are lots of activities, whether it's to do with dance, with visual arts and other activities, they can open up different ways for people to process what's happening. And we found it, even through our own experiences, a very, very empowering and interesting space to explore. Another thing that we've discovered is the importance of connectedness. So, that also refers to your earlier question, Cornelius, of how do you support artists and practitioners and our team members who are engaging in these activities. And we find that providing spaces of connections, developing networks where people can share their experiences, where they can share good practice is hugely important. And that's one of the things that we are doing at the moment. Developing these networks, almost an ecosystem of organizations and practitioners who want to work in this space so that we can do more sharing, we can develop language, maybe more of a common language so that we can better understand each other when we talk about these things, and share training, share good practice and so on. So that element of connectedness is as important, I feel, to the practitioners and artists who work with refugees and asylum seekers, as is important for asylum seekers and refugees, because that sense of belonging and creating a community of people who are there with you, even if it's for periods of times, can be making a huge difference in their lives.
And I would just add to that there's something unique about the arts, and especially and including the nonverbal arts, in creating and supporting that sense of community. That when you sing together in a choral group, when you play together in an instrument ensemble, when you dance together, there is an oxytocin reaction in the brain, the hormone that does reward and support bonding between people, quite literally at a biochemical and neurological level. So it's not a soft science anymore. We're actually understanding not only the hard science behind it, but how this may have evolved in the history of our species. We're the only species on this planet that practices music and moves to a beat. The only other species that can move to the beat is a parrot, and only when they've been domesticated and have been exposed to human behavior. So it's something quite uniquely human to us, and there's a reason why it evolved. Everything has a reason, and part of it, I think, is because of this sense of community that gave us a better chance of survival and allowed us to thrive even in situations where we have been forcibly displaced for whatever reason.
And I thank you both for a really stimulating discussion. Sadly, we are out of time, so I have to bring this to a close. And thanks again, and thanks very much to Veronica for organizing this session and also for organizing the meeting as a whole. And all the very best to you both.
Thank you. And there's Cornelius here with us. Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. And what a brilliant start to this event from people who have such deep experience and knowledge, and some very interesting themes coming out there, which I'm sure will come out in the panels during the rest of the event, especially around language and nonverbal communication and providing those tools for self-care, but also to support people to sustain their well-being, whether they're forcibly displaced people or the people who support them, and this interesting discussion around connection. So thank you very much, Cornelius, and to Christopher and Almir. And I will hand over to Cornelius now, who's going to chair the next panel. And over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. And it's a real delight to be here, not quite in the flesh, but at least in real time. Now, I've got the pleasure today of introducing what I think is quite a fascinating panel of practitioners in the field. And I'm not going to waste the time by babbling, and I'm just going to introduce each of the speakers. And I think the intention is that the themes that connect these different presentations will emerge naturally as the session progresses. So to begin with, it's a great pleasure to introduce Daniela Nofal, who is a producer at Counterpoint Arts, and she has a focus on producing, commissioning, and programming artistic projects which are at the intersection of displacement and mental health. So absolutely spot on for our session today. Daniela has worked as a cultural organizer and arts practitioner and has produced various artistic projects and creative interventions at the intersection of arts, arts education, and social engagement. Over the years, she's collaborated and worked with a number of organisations across the UK and internationally. I should also say that she is here as a representative from Counterpoint Arts, which is a leading national organisation in the field of arts, migration and cultural change that supports and produces arts by and about migrants and refugees, seeking to ensure that their contributions are recognised and are welcomed within British arts, history and culture. Central to the Counterpoint Arts mission is a belief that the arts can inspire social change and can enhance inclusion and cultural integration. Their work takes place at the intersection of climate, racial justice, mental health, and displacement. Daniela, over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Cornelius, for the introduction. It's such a big pleasure to be here with you all today, alongside so many incredible speakers. I will begin by offering some context of the psychosocial experience of forced displacement, which I hope will offer a backdrop to a lot of the work that we do at Counterpoint Arts, but also for many of the projects that we will get to hear from during this afternoon's session. But also importantly, like to situate the work, to situate the traumatic experience of displacement within wider systems and structures that shape the contemporary world. The psychological impact of displacement is an urgent matter and one that many of us are reckoning with today, making it a major public health concern. The UNHCR estimates that in 2023, over 110 million individuals worldwide were forcibly displaced, whether that is due to war, human rights abuses, fear of persecution, or climate catastrophe. In fear for their lives, people find themselves forced to leave their homes, their communities, their countries to find safety and sanctuary elsewhere. This uprooting and extreme sense of loss can in itself be an overwhelming and traumatic experience, but it does not end there. Many end up having to embark on life-threatening journeys to find safety. And as a consequence of racialized, violent border regimes that seek to keep migrants out, innocent people seeking refuge are forced into taking dangerous routes, from taking treacherous sea crossings to traveling with smugglers. And these experiences expose people to immense distress and danger. And for those who eventually arrive at shores of safety, they find themselves welcomed by hostile governments and policies that go to extremely far lengths to make their lives unbearable, to deem them as illegal, criminal even. And stripped of their humanity, many find themselves ending up incarcerated in detention centers whose conditions mirror those of the prison systems. And speaking to the experience in the UK is the only country in Europe where people can be detained indefinitely. Also, the introduction of the hostile environment policies in 2012 makes sure that undocumented migrants are unable to build a life, unable to work, unable to access healthcare, these basic necessities to live a decent life. These policies ensure that borders are not only felt at the edges of the nation states, but creep into society, into the very heart of our public services, as doctors, teachers, and landlords are expected to act as border guards, asking for proof of migration status. And so what this framing helps elicit is the compounded effects on the mental health and well-being of sanctuary seekers, from being forcefully displaced to even when arriving into a new country where they have to navigate violent systems that strip them of their dignity on a day-to-day basis. And as a result, but also as a consequence, and in research by Refugee Council, they state that 61% of refugees and asylum seekers experience serious mental distress. And so for us at Counterpoint Arts, we believe in the power that art can play to open up spaces of sanctuary, where we can begin to heal the pain, to move beyond trauma narratives that risk deeming individuals as inherently broken, where people can reclaim the parts of themselves that had to be locked off in order to survive, where narratives and stories can be reshaped and told with agency, whether that be through comedy, through film, music, dance, theater. And over the years, as an organization, we've had the immense privilege of collaborating and partnering with a whole range of artists, organizations, and institutions that are doing some incredibly groundbreaking work out there, who work at this intersection of displacement, mental health, and the arts, that bring art to newly arrived sanctuary seekers and migrants wherever they be, And just to give you a flavor of some of these projects and initiatives out there, some go into the heart of detention centers, others go into the contingent accommodation available, such as hotels and hostels where many find themselves living. Other projects go into community settings, so from the street level to the neighborhood level. And other projects are run within organizations that, for example, either run one-off projects for refugees or are community arts organizations that specialize in working with refugees or are led by refugees and lived experience of displacement. And the nature of these projects varies tremendously, from one-off projects running for a couple of hours to longer-term projects that run for months or even years. And all in all, these projects speak to the power that art can play and the transformative capacity of art to touch the lives of sanctuary seekers. And so at Counterpoints Arts, we find ourselves working in this incredibly diverse and rich ecosystem. And over the next 2 years, and as part of a new strand of work that we're developing focusing on mental health, which Almir spoke to earlier, we are working on building and nurturing a new network of creative practice to foster connections across this sector, to bring more collaboration to life, to learn from each other about what good practice looks like, with the overarching aim of supporting asylum seekers and refugees across the country and beyond. And there's so much that we can learn from these initiatives, learnings that can go far beyond the migration sector. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of the talks this afternoon, which are going to give us a flavor of the incredible and inspiring work that they do. Thank you so much.
To the next presentation, which is from Bobby Lloyd, who's a visual artist, art therapist, supervisor, lecturer, and the CEO of Art Refuge. Bobby has worked for many years in NHS and in community settings, as well as internationally in contexts of conflict and of social upheaval. Through direct programme delivery on either side of the channel over the past 9 years, she's become increasingly interested in the roles of socially engaged art and art therapy in relation to displacement, to crisis support, to co-production, and to community and social justice. She works within, as I've said, Arts Refuge, which is a UK charity that is quite long-standing. It was founded in 2006 and uses art and art therapy to support mental health and well-being of people displaced due to conflict, persecution and poverty, both in the UK and internationally. Arts Refuge delivers long-term programmes and takes part in short-term projects, public exhibitions, conferences, cross-disciplinary collaborations, and in research, as well as delivering tailor-made trainings and skill-sharing activities to frontline workers, most recently in Western Ukraine. Working in close partnership with other organisations, Arts Refuge's longitudinal psychosocial group programmes take place where refugees and asylum seekers are located on both sides of the English Channel, so in northern France and in southern England, in day centres, in drop-in spaces, in refugee camps and in hotels. Their trauma-informed work is led by an experienced freelance team of registered arts therapists and artists, including artists with lived experience of displacement. Bobby, over to you.
Thank you so much for reading out that full introduction. That's fantastic. I'm just going to put on my timer. And I'm also going to share my screen. Whoops, I don't think that worked, did it? So sorry.
I think it was just loading.
Was it loading? I'm going to try again. I think
it was before you start. Yeah. That's it.
It's summer 2017, a day centre on the edge of Calais, northern France. 2 young men from Afghanistan have been sleeping outside for several days, trying to reach the UK by truck across the English Channel. They join the Art Refuge table, where we have provided a tablecloth map, miniature bricks, and a small yellow truck. The young men play together, their breathing regulates, and they are absorbed for a period of time.
Grazie mille.
So I just wanted to share that little clip just to give you a sense of a little bit of what we do. And I'm going to introduce now the model that we've been developing over the last few years. So out of the Calais context, and also work in a safe house, we've developed a model called the Community Table. It's an open access psychosocial model to support the mental health and well-being of people displaced. And those are people displaced on borders, people on the move, and people in the asylum system. And it's joined largely by men from across North and East Africa. So that's Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, and the Middle East, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Kurdistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, and so on. And also further afield. Always working in collaboration with other organizations, we go to where people are located. And as Cornelius has already said, we work on borders, we work in day centers, we work in both makeshift camps and also home office run large camps in the UK now, and in hotels. And currently we're working in Paris, Dunkirk, where we were yesterday, Calais, Kent, Essex, London, and Bristol. What's unique about the Community Table is that those who are displaced alongside the community around them, so that might be volunteers, interpreters, NGO staff, even sometimes security guards, are welcome to join, offering temporary community for even the briefest period of time for everybody at the table. And against the ever harsher hostile policies and uncertainties that are part of daily life, the work aims to support the resilience of people, their capacity for imagination, hoping and coping, communication, meaning-making and solidarity. And indeed, and this is also special to the Community Table, to support the mental health and well-being of all those taking part in a context in which burnout is so prevalent amongst frontline workers. And being a mobile project, we adapt our work to context. That's to the weather, to the setting, the political context, and of course to the people present. We think carefully about intentionality, which includes the materials and the tools that we introduce. Often pre-used, we have, for example, offered manual typewriters at the table over a number of years. And if anybody's listening who's interested from a neuroscience perspective, we'd be very interested to hear from you. We've been really thinking about what it is that these typewriters offer, because we've seen how valuable they are in supporting a positive physiological response. And I exist, my name is, I have value. So Abdullah typed letters to all those who had helped him along his route, taking the letters with him to his tent on the edge of Calais, rereading them when needed, reaffirming his sense of himself in relation to others, and returning to the Community Table in a day centre in Calais over a number of years because he was stuck in France. He spoke of the table like this: it's like when you go to your grandmother's house with an atmosphere like that. All people, young and old, when I need time for myself, I go there. Just to end, that many people we see only once. And so we extend our work into the space of social media for ongoing connection in the virtual space. But sometimes we meet people at the Community Table again in the UK, and it might be in a hotel, and it might be in one of the camps. It's familiar and it's familial. And for volunteers and others who join our tables, we also offer skill sharing and training in addition to community and well-being support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was Brilliant, and thank you also for the video. Now, I think we should move straight on, if that's all right. So we have plenty of time for discussion at the end. And I'm delighted to introduce Sheila Heyman, who is the coordinator of Right to Life, which is the therapeutic creative writing group at Freedom from Torture. She's been doing this particular line of work for over 20 years and is justifiably very proud of its status as the longest running therapeutic running group in the UK, as well as the only one specifically for survivors of torture. As the child of a refugee from Nazi Germany herself, and with a parent who became a distinguished mathematician, she was used from an early age to visitors from around the world and relishes the mix of cultures that her current work involves. In her other life, she's a documentary filmmaker, a writer, and a journalist whose films have won a BAFTA, Time Out Documentary Series of the Year, Arts Documentary of the Year nomination, and a Robert Kennedy Award. She's been UK Young Journalist of the Year, the BAFTA Fulbright Fellow in Los Angeles, and is waving her hands for me to stop. So I will take instructions and stop. But I will say that she was also artist in residence at PIK Potsdam, working on the carbon footprint of AI. And she's on the board of the Minderoo Centre for Technology and Democracy in Cambridge. I should also say a few words about Freedom from Torture, which provides specialist psychological therapy for asylum seekers and refugees who've survived torture, helping them to recover, to rebuild their lives in the UK. Freedom from Torture also provides a range of other therapies, including gardening, bread making, music therapy, as well as Right to Life. And I think I'm not going to say any more about Right to Life because I'll leave that to Sheila. So over to you.
Hi, that was very, very embarrassing indeed. I had no idea that all that was coming out. I'm really sorry. But actually, since you started talking about AI and intelligence, just off the back of what Christopher was saying and what Bobby was saying, one of my interests is in embodied intelligence. And I can say that when people dance together or play music together or sing together, it's not just a matter of getting oxytocin. They actually synchronize their brain waves and heartbeats. So you do actually become a single organism when you're doing something like that together. So that's really worth knowing. And all on the back of what Bobby was saying, yes, the neuroscience is very clear that when you type something physically, on an analog machine, it has an effect on your brain completely different from just kind of touching a screen. So all hail the analog, and long may it continue. I think the other thing I want to say before I start talking about Right to Life is, and I hope people will forgive me because I'm a huge fan of everybody who's spoken just now and lucky to be friends with them. I do think that actually above anything that we can offer, the most important thing to make people happy and stop them from being mad is agency, autonomy, work, money, and freedom. And until we give our refugees and asylum seekers those things, everything else that we do, although it's fantastic and will enhance their lives in many ways, is not going to ultimately lead to long-term happiness. That's what I believe anyway. I also wanted to pick up from what Alma was saying, that the non-verbal is really important to us at Freedom from Torture. So we do have a gardening group, horticultural therapy group, which can work largely without words. And we've just been lucky enough to have a garden at the Chelsea Flower Show this year, which is a sort of celebration of that work. And we have a bread baking group because, as we all know, one of the overarching principles of asylum in this country is that if you can cook, you are more welcome than if you can't. So people bake bread of all kinds from all over the world as part of our therapeutic activities, and they knead it and shape it and watch it rise and come to life together. And that's a big part of what Freedom from Torture does too. As for Right to Life, it has been running nearly 25 years continuously, and some of the members have been here almost from the beginning, which is a hugely important thing, because if you have been tortured and you've come to a country where you don't know anybody, counterintuitively, the people from your own culture may actually be the people you can least trust and least rely on. And so people are often even more isolated than they might be otherwise. So when they come to a group where people may be from completely different countries, but have had the same emotional and psychological experience, they discover that they can trust each other because they don't need to explain things. And so our group becomes a second family, and people travel for extraordinarily long distances to just sit around a table and eat an indifferent meal and just be together and write. Its purposes are creative, obviously, self-expression, rebuilding a new identity. One of the objectives of torture is essentially to destroy your identity and make you feel that you don't exist and that you are worth nothing, even if you did exist. And when you write something on a page and there it is in front of you, and it comes from a voice that you may not have even known was inside you, but clearly is, it actually reaffirms the fact that you do exist. And when you read it out to other people and they listen, people have said to me that it's like holding a mirror up and actually seeing that once again, you are a person, you do have a voice, you do have an image, you do have something to say, and you are valued. So that's a really important part of it. The therapeutic aspect is also really important. People often come to us tormented by appalling nightmares of the stuff that's happened to them. And if it's not processed, it just goes round and round in their heads. You know, they're terrified of going to sleep for fear of what they might dream of. And if they're not sleeping, they can go mad with insomnia. So we have to try and find a way of taking those nightmares out of their heads and onto the page. And having put them on the page, they can then control that narrative. It's theirs to control and shape rather than having control of them. So we encourage people, even when they go to bed, to have a pen and paper by the bed to write down anything that comes to them in the night so that it's not running them and they're running it. Having told these stories, and we don't on the whole encourage people to write about their bad experiences because we're not therapeutically trained, we're not psychotherapists. People come to the group referred by their clinician at Freedom from Torture. So they all have clinicians, but they're allowed to stay as long as they like. So often they stay long after their clinical treatment has ended. And we become a kind of bridge from Freedom from Torture, the therapeutic side of Freedom from Torture, into the new world. But anyway, they come to us having been recommended by their clinicians, and they don't necessarily write about their experiences. They are free to write about whatever they want to, but the pain that they have had is often a kind of rocket fuel for what they write, and many of them do choose to write about that stuff. So the rocket fuel is what they've gone through. It's the power, gives the power to their words and their stories. But we then help them to sheath it, as it were, in the stealth weapon of art. So beautiful words or beautiful images in the case of films, or beautiful sounds, if we turn it into music, can enable those messages to penetrate the defenses of the hostile, or the indifference of those who don't really care and haven't really thought about it one way or another. So I think by making art, and I'm sure that this is the experience of lots of other people who are on this panel today, by making art out of the experience of refuge or torture or any of these other awful things, we are able to get it to places that would never ever be able to be reached by yet another diatribe about the awfulness of the system, or yet another complaint about the misery of people's lives. And that's really important to us. And it you know, that beauty really touches the people who make it as well as the people who experience it, I think. So we start with writing. We have a writing group, which meets as a group every 2 weeks. And everybody in the group also gets one-to-one work with a writing mentor. And then in addition to that, we do have these special projects to widen our impact and our reach. So we've grown from a few people just writing for each other to a group writing for online and print, and performing through plays, films, binaural musical narratives, and other things. We've collaborated with the V&A, the British Museum, both Tate Galleries, the Roundhouse, and King's Place. And we're always looking for new creative partners to work with. And we also send out our work in the form of zines, which are we've handmade literal physical copies of zines, which we get together with scissors and paper and put together, which is an enormous fun, about twice a year.
Thank you so much, Sheila. That was a lovely presentation, as indeed all three were. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, and one theme that seems to have come through from all three of your presentations is the notion of people who are not psychotherapists doing this work. And I'm just wondering, and another theme that came through was about the potential for stress and burnout. And I'm just wondering whether you might all three just say a little bit about what is the best way to approach training on the one hand and support and avoidance of burnout on the other. among the staff and the volunteers who work within your projects?
I mean, in our project, we do, in theory, have the support of the clinicians who work with our clients, but they don't all have clinicians, obviously, because sometimes they finish their clinical treatment before we've stopped working with them. I guess, actually, for a lot of the people who work with me, writing is in itself, to some extent, a way to process. You know, we process our experiences in the same way as the people in the group do. But often, as I said, we give them the choice, really. I mean, it's not like the therapy that they receive, where often they don't feel in control and they can be ambushed by a flashback or some dreadful episode when they're not expecting it and don't need it. They feel much more in control of the progress of their journey, I think, by doing it through writing, which they can do when they choose to and how they choose to. So I don't think, I mean, we're exposed to a lot of grief, but I don't think necessarily that we're exposed to quite as much trauma as some people who are working really on the front line without the support of clinicians. So I will shut up about my experiences at that point.
Daniela, do you want to add anything to that?
Shall I go next?
Yeah, do.
So we, Art Refuge is made up of a team of freelance trained therapists. So we're art therapists. And also we work with artists who have lived experience of displacement, and we bring other people in. But the being therapists ourselves enables us, I think, to deal with the uncertainty, to go into all sorts of range of different contexts, and to be able to be present in those contexts with whatever comes. So, for example, going into some of these larger camps, which are intimidating spaces, and being able to sit with people with whatever they bring. And often in those settings where we're working with people in limbo, it's really about just being able to tolerate listening and witnessing, but it also could be a little bit more. But we bring in artists who are refugees themselves, with refugee backgrounds or other experiences of displacement, because we haven't got that knowledge. So we try and sort of mix it up. And I think the work does enable us to see the bigger picture and to sort of zoom in and out. And with the sort of thinking brain, we do a huge amount of reflecting and thinking after and before and around the sessions. And just this all enables us to be present with people. So I don't know if that contributes to the discussion.
It definitely contributes. Thank you. Daniela, anything to add?
Yes, so for us at Counterpoints Arts, we have different lived experiences within the team. Also, the artists that we work with have different lived experiences. And recently, since start launching this new strand of work around mental health, we've been having various conversations as well around artists stewarding the trauma of others, particularly artists that are working in socially engaged capacities, and kind of rethinking what kind of support is needed to be offered to artists that are leading on this work. And I think that requires organizations generally to rethink processes and structures, thinking about supervision, thinking about any additional resources that need to be built into the design of projects, you know, how much time is given, how much resources in general. And so that's been a conversation that's been very much alive for us. It's always been very present in the work, but we're in conversation with artists around what we can do to support them when leading on this work. But also internally, we've been done some training on trauma-informed practice with a brilliant organization, Kazum Arts, but also AMNA International as well. And so there's brilliant resources out there that can help organizations and individuals to reflect on trauma, how it appears and how it manifests, and how most of us have our own trauma, and how that can be activated, and how we can embed that awareness in the different processes that we work through and work with.
Thank you. One other thing that struck me listening to the three presentations is that there was a lot of commonality. And I think it's one of the underlying assumptions behind today's conference, that there are commonalities across the arts. There are ways in which art, in a general sense, is a good thing in the refugee and asylum, mental health, trauma context. But what I wonder is whether any of you might want to say anything about comparing and contrasting, about horses for courses, about the difference between working in a written medium, in a dramatic medium, in a visual medium.
I don't know. I mean, I think at the community table, which is, it's only one of the models we use, but it is our core model. We use visual art. It's our main form. But sometimes, and also just to say that all of us, art therapists, artists, and of course those people joining us around the table, all make visual art together. And that is a really core element of the work. And sometimes we need to bring in other art forms. So that's where the difference lies. And we really have this absolute urge to bring in dance movement, and we find and source and collaborate with others across art forms. So I think in that sense, we're strong in what we are and who we are. Sometimes the other art forms are absolutely critical in enabling us to offer something that's bigger and richer and yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's absolutely right. It so happens that we work primarily with writing, partly because, as I said, the urgency of enabling people to speak for themselves. As I was trying to explain with the other forms of therapy that we have at Freedom from Torture, you know, there are other forms that are non-verbal and that work through embodiment, and that is, I think, absolutely crucial for people who maybe don't have so much language or just express themselves in different ways.
Thank you. Daniela?
Yeah, I'm also happy to reflect. So at the minute, there's two projects that kind of came to mind as you were asking the question. And one is the No Direction Home, which Almir spoke about, which is around running comedy workshops with asylum seekers and refugees. And that, for example, is really around kind of reclaiming a narrative, reclaiming a story, remembering. There's a lot of laughter and joy. And I think that playfulness really unlocks a different sense of presence in a space, and is a reminder of the parts of ourselves that might have been locked away because of the traumatic experience one has been through, the violent systems one are in. So it's about regaining access to those parts that never really left us. They're always part of us. And then, for example, another project which we're running with a commission with Kadir Karababa, who's an artist, running singing workshops and thinking about singing and voice and that somatic capacity to unlock certain things in the body. There's that release that comes with it. And I feel each art form does offer different ways of accessing certain parts of the body or certain parts of the self. And there's a whole array of art forms, but each of them, I think, lead to different ways of reclaiming one's agency, one's voice, accessing parts of oneself, and also being able to do that work within the body in an embodied way, so that there's that muscle memory that takes shape and takes hold of these positive and joyful experiences.
I think can I just say one last thing about comedy? I think that's absolutely true what you said, but I think the other thing that's really important about comedy is it's about power. If you make fun of something, whether it's the asylum system, you know, or other things that people have done to you, or people's cruelty or people's pomposity, you become in control of it. You control the narrative, and that gives you power over them, which is why all dictators loathe being made fun of. And so I think one of the really important things about doing comedy with people who've endured this kind of experience is that it gives them the power to control the narrative of what's happened to them. You know,
exactly. And it's the same with well, you know, you can do things to language. You know, you can speak about the systems that have excluded you, so you can exclude them in a way through having that sense of control again. So yeah, I think these all speak to the power of art in its different shapes and capacities.
And I'm afraid we've run out of time. Can I thank you all three very much for wonderful presentations, wonderful discussion. Just one tiny observation from me to try and bring it to a close. One of the things that struck me most hearing you all is about togetherness, about the notion that you are all working with people together. You are all, there's this notion of the collective functioning. And I think that one of the elements of that has to be about relearning trust, relearning to work together, which is, I think, one of the key things that's been implied in a lot of what you say, and certainly resonates very much for me. So thank you all three very much indeed for wonderful, wonderful presentations and discussion. And we now move on. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cornelius, for your wonderful sharing, wise sharing, and to Daniela, Bobby, and Sheila for sharing your phenomenal, heartwarming work. And now we have the most amazing, we're all amazing, but musical interlude, The Unknowns, Hear Me Out, the refugees performing Hope for Humanity.
I keep crazy! I keep crazy!
So this song says, we were human before race. We are all one. I cut you, I cut myself. I see red blood, you see red blood. We all one. And this is hope for humanity. Yeah, love is the greatest.
Never forget this. Never forget this. That humanity comes before race. Never forget this. Never forget this. Never forget this. That humanity comes before race. Never forget it. Love is the greatest gift of hope to all humanity. Love is the greatest gift, hope to humanity. Love is the greatest gift of hope to all humanity. Love is the greatest.
تو و من هر دو در یک دنیاییم، از خاک متفاوت اما یکسانیم. رنگ پوست فقط یه لایه سطحیه، ما هممون از خون ساخته شدیم. ما جنگ نداریم، با هم برابریم، نه سیاه نه سفید، فقط بشریم. برای اینکه دنیا رو بهتر کنیم متحدیم. سیاه و سفیدش هیچ فرقی نداره، همه در رأس جهان مشترکی، یه قلب یه روح یه هدف یه آرزو به هم متصلی، این اتحادمونه که قویه، اتحادمونه که قویه، اتحادمونه.
Thank you very much to the Hear Me Out band, the Unknowns. I should like to introduce our next chair, Professor Rachel Tribe. Rachel is a professor of applied psychology at the School of Psychology, University of East London and Queen Mary, University of London, and chair of the international mental health charity CareIF. She has worked clinically and published widely on migration and mental health, refugees and asylum seekers, and trauma, and is team leader for the Refugee Mental Health and Wellbeing Resource Portal. Professor Tribe is a member of the Human Rights Committee of the British Psychological Society, whose guidelines on working with refugees and asylum seekers and on working with interpreters in health settings she has co-edited. Her book, Working with Interpreters in Mental Health, is currently being updated. Professor Tribe is a member of the World Psychiatric Association's Task Force on Migration and Mental Health. You are very warmly welcome, Rachel. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a privilege and an honor to be here and hear these amazing speakers. I also wanted to thank Veronica for all the hard work she's gone to in organizing today, because I know these things are not easy. I set up with a team of refugees, community groups, and other people, a refugee and mental health and wellbeing portal. And it has a whole range of resources, but we're always interested in adding to it. We do a big update once a year. We do it in our own time. So if anyone has any resources they would like to add to that, we would love to hear from you. Anyway, that's quite enough about me. So I'm going to move on and introduce our first speaker on our amazing panel this afternoon. I've got a shorter version, Sarah Green, who is the founder and executive director of Art for Refugees in Transition, ART. Since 2003, she has implemented programs for refugees, displaced, migrant and marginalized communities, with programs in Thailand, Colombia, Egypt, Jordan, the list goes on, but I'm going to finish it, Israel, Cameroon, Tajikistan, and Palestine. Accredited by UNESCO, ART Art was awarded the 2023 the Jeonju Award presentation of intangible cultural heritage. So welcome, Sarah. We look forward to hearing you.
So thank you very much for having me. I deeply apologize about my inability to speak. No pain, just no voice. The work that my organization does is very important and much needed as we mark today, World Refugee Day. And I want to thank Veronica for hosting this panel and bringing voice to the need for the arts, for refugees, and for the recognition that these people deserve dignity. And the work that we do focuses on having the elders in the community teach the youngest generation their cultural heritage, therefore creating community and identity. And it's a very important bond and very much an important part of our identity is our culture. To speak about a project we did earlier, late last year. We all know the events that are happening in the Middle East right now. And we had a program running for 3 years in the West Bank in a Palestinian refugee camp. And when the events of October 7th unfolded, obviously the world changed. My country director asked me, what can I do? Everybody is home, everyone is traumatized, and everybody is scared. And we had worked during the pandemic in this camp where we had programs for the grandparents teaching the children their crafts and their stories. So we started a program where we had the women in the homes sing lullabies to the children. And what we found was that it created a sense of peace and a sense of trust within the family, with the elders there, the fathers, the children, the mothers. And as a result, the mothers in the camp formed a WhatsApp group to discuss this. And then we started a nightly WhatsApp lullaby hour where they could tune in and either sing or listen to lullabies. And we forget that our culture has not only an effect on building our identity, but also in helping us in times of need and in trauma. So those are the work, that's the sort of work that we do. And we really believe that if we can pull from the identity and the heritage by preserving and perpetuating and also documenting the cultural heritage of these refugees, we are helping them remember and also live with this heritage, which serves as a means to deal with the trauma that they are dealing with and focusing on because of their displacement.
Well, thank you for a really moving and important talk. And I particularly like to thank you with your laryngitis. She is an associate professor of neurological rehabilitation at Qatar University at Doha in Qatar, and she's very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you so much for Veronica and the organizers for inviting me to speak to you today. It's a true pleasure to be with you. My name is Hanan Khalil. I'm originally from Jordan. I've done my training in physical therapy in Jordan, and then I went to the UK, done my master and PhD in Cardiff University. And I was till maybe 2016 very much focused on the brain health and how movement could help, particularly in the area of dementia. But as you know, like there is ongoing conflict in the region, and Jordan has witnessed an increased number of refugees, particularly at the time of the Syrian war. In fact, according to the UN stats, Jordan is ranked as the second top country in the world in the number of refugees per 1,000 people, and most of them are from Syria. We, as the previous speakers have indicated and mentioned, a lot of those have experienced torture, and a lot of them have also experienced trauma. We have stats according and some publications which indicate that emotional and mental health problems are very prevalent among Syrian refugees, particularly when it comes to stress and anxiety, depression, and also PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, which can lead to chronic pain, sleep difficulties, and then decrease in function. But at the same time, with all the prevalent mental health problems, there is very limited access when it comes to the mental health services. The intervention or the toolkit that I'm using is slightly different than the others in terms of the arts. We use a lot of movements. I'm a physiotherapist in background, and we like movement and movement-based exercise intervention. And when it comes to the work with refugees, there are a lot of NGOs and organizations is trying to help refugees in Jordan. However, okay, like among of those, like organizations who are focused toward delivering, let's say, something specific to mental health is very, very limited. A lot of them, they focus on the physical injuries. And there is one, up to my knowledge, one in Jordan that it does incorporate movement-based therapies, which is called Center of Victims of Torture. So we've been collaborating with the CVT, or Center of Victims of Torture, as an academic institution. I've been working for years in the Jordan University of Science and Technology toward building trauma-focused physiotherapy services to the Syrian refugees, or to the refugees, to the traumatized refugees in general. And I do believe that there is a strong rationale for using exercise and movement-based interventions, because when it comes to the exercise science, we know that exercise can increase cerebral blood flow, can reduce the sympathetic nervous system activity, and can reduce the cortisol level, implicating the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and can improve the release of numerous neurotransmitters that it does modulate stress, pain, sleep, and mood as well. So the CVT intervention is really a group-based intervention. It's 10-week cycle. It's manualized. The aim of the treatment is really trauma-focused, using the movement within a multidisciplinary approach. So each client would also have received counseling from a psychologist and also counseling from a social worker. The guiding principles for the movement-based intervention is really trauma-informed, psychological, psychosocial, and also being tailored to the individuals. So our journey with the CVT, that we have that cross-cultural collaborative approach with continued emphasis on a trauma, both from an academic perspective, but also from an educational perspective, to progress towards evidence-informed trauma-focused physiotherapy interventions. We've done a lot of like cross-sectional qualitative work in terms of focus groups with therapists working with these clients, and also with the clients themselves. And there are a lot of lessons that we have learned. One of the very most important, which is maybe everyone does know, that intertwined physical, social, psychological symptoms are a key feature of a clinical presentations for trauma-exposed refugees, that a client-centered approach that incorporates trauma-informed care and trauma-focused care is really important. It's really critical throughout the care pathway. We knew that therapists usually or often are not prepared to deliver that kind of intervention, and that training gaps are evident. We've worked with the CVT toward finding ways to increase access. One of them is adapting their intervention for remote delivery. So created a lot of resources that would support the remote delivery for their intervention. In the UK, we collaborated with Cardiff University for peer delivery of the intervention. And currently we are working on building resources to raise awareness among refugees, and also educational programs for capacity buildings among universities and also among healthcare professionals. And thank you so much. I hope I'm tight in time.
Thank you, Hanan. That was a really interesting talk. And it's interesting how the complementarity between different speakers doing different things, but all coming from with the same ethos and commitment to the work. So thank you. So we've got a very busy schedule, but a very important one. It's now my pleasure to introduce Liz Murphy, who is Creative Director and founder of Music Action International, which has facilitated music and skill sharing programs with survivors of war and torture in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Georgia in the Caucasus, Palestine, Ireland, and Sierra Leone. And she will be followed by Ramzi Janini, who is creative producer of Music Action International's Crisis Choirs. I hope we're going to get some singing, led by refugee musicians for new arrivals at drop-in centres. He is from a family who were ethnically cleansed from Palestine in 1948. So you're very welcome and thank you. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been really, really fascinating today to hear from lots of different speakers from different art forms, different approaches, but I think there's huge commonalities with the work that we do as well. So just a bit about the background of the founding of the organisation. I'm a musician and my first job was working in Bosnia-Herzegovina a couple of years after the war there. I lived out there for 2 years and worked with a local team with facilitating music programs with children. And I just learned a huge amount while I was there. And I really wanted to take the ethos and the inspiration of a lot of the young people that I'd worked with to support refugees and safety seekers back here, and also people who were displaced in different communities. I think one of the main things that influenced the methodology in the beginning was within Bosnia, the sort of setups of some of the NGOs was that the local people felt they weren't always listened to or they didn't have influence in the programs. And now lived experience is a very common term, so it's really amazing to see how that's shifted. I think for us that was really key in the beginning, that people with lived experience were at all levels of the organisation and in the facilitation team. So we're the methodology of everything we do is very similar. It's around creating a safe space. It's around sharing songs and languages from different countries, and then creative writing, usually towards some sort of performance or video. And the way that we structure it is that we have trained facilitators who are trained in trauma awareness and refugee awareness, who are, I think, global majority and with lived experience, and they are professional musicians or dancers or poets, and they then work with people who are in the absolute crisis point to use music, particularly music, but other art forms as well, as a way of reducing the trauma and stress that we've been talking about, that people have back home in their country, but then also with the systems that they're facing here. And then another strand that I want to pick up on was that we were really lucky with our first programme that we did with torture survivors, was in partnership with Freedom from Torture in the Northwest. I talked to them about some of the impact that Bosnia had on me, and they basically diagnosed me with vicarious trauma. And so because of that, this health and well-being of the staff and the people that are working directly with participants has been an intrinsic part developed with the clinical psychologists, but also with refugees and people from different backgrounds, to make sure that we have we don't call it supervision because we found out musicians don't turn up if you call it that. We call it well-being support, but that it's structured in all the programs and in the way that we bring groups together. So in the past, we've done skill sharing in various different places, Palestine, Georgia. We've got an ongoing project in Sierra Leone, but the majority of the work we do at the moment is in the UK. And that's with all age groups, with teenagers, with torture survivors, with in primary schools as well. And one of those programs is called Crisis Choirs. So I'm going to hand over to Ramsey, who runs Crisis Choirs.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lise, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for incredibly informative and inspiring talks. So Crisis Choirs, as Lise mentioned, is a project of ours that I'm a project manager for. So the concept of Crisis Choirs is that it's a singing group that takes place within drop-in centers. Going back to the very first speaker who was talking about the people we work with obviously have a very complex needs of where the arts come in is not necessarily number one. So we're always working in partnerships that are looking at sort of more holistic issues or more sort of more about personal security around housing and income. They have support there, but also often they're given a slot at these centers, and there are waiting rooms where there might be other activities going on, but sometimes people are there a little bit tense, perhaps about an upcoming meeting. And we're often setting up in those spaces. We'll have a team of about 2 or 3, inclusive of experiences of displacement, war, conflict, or refugee and asylum system. And we create a circle. At first, we'd often open the session, as has also been mentioned, with non-verbal activities. It could be just copying body movements. A lot of those informed by studies of trauma and body movements that can help release trauma and regulate breathing and regulate blood flow. And then from there, we are working from the participants' experiences and languages. So we have a repertoire of music which has been written in different programs. So depending on the makeup of the group, let's say there's a group of Sudanese Arabic speakers, for example, then we'll have a number of songs that have been written, or they might be songs that are very well known in particular regions. So it's always that, it's always music which is coming either from suggested by the participants, which we learn or we jam on very quickly. Or otherwise works that have been written in different projects. Although it's a mix of engaging the people there in their own languages, but also about sharing languages. And as we get to writing music together, that tends to be multilingual, quite a bit like what we saw with the Hear Me Out performance just there. So yeah, just to be a bit quick, we work in 3 different regions, and every project takes on particularities depending on the needs of participants there, and in some respects on the characteristics of the support organization. So in the Northwest at the moment, there's a partnership with a wonderful group called Rainbow Haven, where there's a free meal provided in between our music sessions. And yeah, one lovely art, because as I'm based in the Northwest, I'm very involved in that. And one lovely thought that we just had a culminating session for this project phase. And we stay with groups over time, so we don't, just so we continue our engagement. But there are a couple of new babies that had been born in the time, and we were just reflecting on how we had been singing to those children in the womb, and then here they were now. So just as a kind of marker of the time that has been passed. And yeah, and it's wonderful to bring smiles to people's faces. So in London, there's a very special project, which is a partner called Rainbows Across Borders, which focus on refugees who also identify as LGBTQ+. So yeah, people who are doubly marginalized in many respects. And that again has an inclusive team, and they just had a performance at Queen's House on Sunday for Refugee Week, which I hear went really well. And so one thing that's special about that, and one thing we try to emphasize, is although our work is engaging people who don't have any musical experience at all necessarily, if there are people with musical experience, we also offer pathways to employment. And from that partnership, there are 2 young facilitators who trained with us a bit and are now facilitating other projects entirely, as well as facilitating that group. So that's a really great story. That's our partnership with Rainbows Across Borders. And then we're also looking to expand to different regions. So we have a project in Brighton, which is just developing. And there our facilitation team includes a Ukrainian refugee and a Russian facilitator. So we're obviously all about bringing the world together and looking past issues of politics and conflict, in an appropriate and sensitive way. So yeah, I think I reached my time, but I hope I gave some sense of our attitude and our work.
Thank you very much. Yes, you certainly did, Ramsey. That was a really inspiring talk, and so much to think about. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Joanne Hudson-Light, who can see with his lovely smile in front of us, is Artistic Director for Hear Me Out, bringing music making into UK immigration detention centres. Johan is also a trustee for the Philharmonia Orchestra. For 25 years, she doesn't look old enough, her career has centred around the arts and media. I'll find her secret later. She is passionate about working with local and marginalised communities, the world she grew up in, and feels now that it is time to give back. So thank you, Johanna. Over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's just so wonderful to be here in a room of such amazing people and hearing about everybody. And thank you, Veronica. We randomly met, and so it's one of those things where the universe knows what it's doing, and so here I am. So yeah, I'm the artistic director for Hear Me Out, only since January though, but my relationship with Hear Me Out started many years ago, when I started as a music practitioner working in Yarlswood Detention Centre, and at the time when I was working in there, and I worked in there for about 4 years, it was a female only detention centre. And I would go in, I'd run choir sessions and also run kind of keyboard, piano sessions as well. And my love I guess I'm giving back because I didn't have the world wasn't kind to me as a child. Racial kind of like lots of racial abuse, because I kind of like I live in a very white area in where I live in Bedford. I also went to a private school, so that didn't help. So I kind of like faced a lot of difficulties and struggles, and I just thought, gosh, the world needs to be a happier place. This is ridiculous. So I'm always interested in art, and I think from a very young age, I kind of like thought, how will my love for the arts, how can I make it do good? And it wasn't until I started working in Yarlswood that I was like, here it is. This is where I'm meant to be. This was my calling. Worked my way up the company, I guess is what I could say. And now I'm working with Hear Me Out and the work that we do. So we work at the moment, we're in 2 hotels, working with young children. And we're also at Napier Barracks, which is down at Folkestone, and that's men only. And we send our artists into the various settings and we make music. That's all I can say, is that everybody is welcome to come and join us and make music. We always send out 2 practitioners in whatever setting they're going into, because it's so important, as I know from being an artist myself, to have that support, because we're working in very challenging situations and places, and also it's also for our own mental health and well-being that you've got somebody there to support you. As you heard, we have a couple of bands. Actually, no, we've got 3 bands, which was not intentional at all. So the Unknowns, who you heard earlier, that was Kwaku, who was singing Hope for Humanity. So the Unknowns, they are all refugees and asylum seekers that we met in hotels when we go into the hotels and run sessions, and then a band formed. And now I think they're on their 4th or 5th gig now. And the joy that I see when the band is playing, in that we know that there are some of the asylum seekers are in desperate situations and they need an outlet. And through music, for so many of the members, through music is their outlet. It's their way of reminding themselves who they are, reminding themselves of the strength that they have. And then when they're working with other people who are in or have been in the same situation as them, there's that communality, there's that family, there's that bringing hope, there's that sharing of stories. We allow that space for all that to happen. And for one of the band members said to me yesterday, which is, so they've just done 2 gigs, one was in Richmond and the other one was in Wandsworth, and they've got another gig on Saturday, and we've got a band at the Barracks. I don't know if anybody's going to Hastings. If you're going to Hastings for the Sanctuary Festival, we're going to be there with band from the Barracks. So yeah, sorry, one of the members from the Unknowns had said, you know, Jo, playing with this band and having access to music, it gives me hope, because without music, I don't know where I would be. I'm so sad inside that playing music and being with this band keeps me going. And sometimes I really don't sometimes I forget how important it is what we do, and how the arts has this effect on people in enabling people to have that little moment of not being who they are necessarily, having that little moment of being on a stage and performing and having that voice, the voice and the power, because all of our bands, they write their own music. It's all original stuff. And having that, giving that sense of having a voice heard is so, so important. My summary is that the arts, working in the refugee and asylum system, is one of the most important, apart from giving them access to good solicitors and legal advice. The arts has this impact that no other thing can have, that same sort of impact of where your emotions, you can let your emotions out and spill out, and you can say what you need to say, and we support them as much as we can. We have a support worker as well who will help with legal cases. But I feel privileged. I feel absolutely privileged to do the job that I do and to help shape their journey in the music world. And who knows, Glastonbury could be next. If it is, you're all invited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johan. That was wonderful. I love the name of your organization. It says it all, and your enthusiasm is inspirational. So thank you. Our next speaker is Phoebe Shaw, who is the Community Programs Manager at Arts Corps in Derby and coordinator of Untold Stories at their community hub, where refugees and asylum seekers participate in art activities with the local community. Welcome, and over to you.
So thank you very much. I will reiterate what everybody has already said, and a great thanks to Veronica for inviting me to speak today. And listening to everybody else speak has been really fascinating. I am Phoebe, and I am the programme producer for Art Corps, and we are based in Derby in the UK. We are a visual arts charity. We have a contemporary art gallery as well as a community hub. We host exhibitions and residencies from our gallery, and we deliver a range of creative arts workshops from our community hub for our diverse community in Derby and beyond. Our statement, Together We Stand, summarises how we really want to engage and connect with a diverse range of communities, and our key objective is to use art as a tool to strengthen community cohesion, to educate, raise awareness, and provide space to build self-confidence. So there's a few images on these slides and there for you to have a look at as we go along. This is part of our Untold Stories project, which is funded by the Bearing Foundation. And it focuses on working with recent immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers and members of Derby's Bosnian and South Asian communities. And we are delivering a programme of workshops which invite local communities to share their stories through engagement with creative arts. Working alongside professional artists, we have developed a programme of workshops that highlight the importance of using art as a universal language to break down barriers to communication and to support creativity, confidence building, development of social skills, and improvement of mental health and well-being. Something that's really been highlighted to us since we've started this project is how much art can enrich lives and how it can build confidence as well as a sense of identity, and how it can improve that mental well-being and help to interpret the world around us. So these are a few images from the project so far and the individuals that we've been working with. And you can see in these images as well, we deliver these workshops both from our own community hub, but we also go and deliver outreach sessions at Derby's Bosnian Centre, which supports refugees who have come over from Bosnia, but also it hosts Derby's Refugee Advice Centre, where refugees go for advice appointments, and while they're waiting, we deliver these workshops. And in this particular instance, you can see here, the individuals were creating booklets, and in these booklets, they're given the opportunity and the space to draw images, and it could be how they're feeling, it could be anything that they wanted to express. But in this particular instance, we had an individual share with us how he had made his journey to the UK, and because of the language barrier, he was able to communicate with us through these drawings, which was really powerful. I'll just talk briefly about a particular case study that we've had through this project, which has been really inspiring. And through this Untold Stories, we've been able to celebrate our participants' individuality. They've been able to find friends, and with what many describe as a safe space within our centres, with the freedom to explore art in a fun, warm and inclusive way. Many of our participants have found their voice and creative niche. For example, one individual discovered their love of poetry and spoken word, and then they use that to explore their feelings with their personal life experiences as well. And this person tackled difficult subject matter relating to race and equality, but through ArtCore, they've had the space to explore these feelings. They've since grown in confidence, formed new friendships, explored new techniques in media that they've never considered to do before. So to summarise, we've had some takeaways from this project so far, which has been a fantastic experience to work on. And that really is that sharing lived experiences is so powerful, and creative activities are an ideal catalyst for this. Our Untold Stories project is helping to build bridges and strengthen relationships through greater understanding of life experiences. And using art is a way that we can facilitate recovery and self-expression. Art can act as a catalyst for emotions and therefore sharing experiences, and this is a really powerful thing. We look forward to curating an exhibition of work produced in the Untold Stories project, which will be displayed at the ArtCore Gallery in early 2025. And I will leave you with some of our contact information, but I can always put that in the chat as well. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Phoebe. That was a fascinating talk. And I think a theme that's come across is around universal language through the arts, when people don't have a shared language or culture. So thank you very much. I'm sure there's going to be some questions at the end. And this is Kunle Adewale, who is an award-winning Nigerian multimedia artist, curator, cultural producer, mental and brain health advocate, and arts in health practitioner. Kunle is founder of the Global Arts in Medicine Fellowship and on the steering committee of the World Health Organization Jameel Arts and Health Lab. He's working in Manchester and has recorded this presentation on the use of creative technologies as artistic support for refugees and humanitarian workers in Sheffield, Bosnia, and Dublin.
I'm very excited to join all of you today on the World Refugees Day. And today I'm going to be talking about a project I think it's very dear to my heart, and working with the refugees across the world. And I'm going to be talking about virtual reality for refugees' mental health. This is a project that I've been working on for quite a long time now. And the internal objectives of this project is to observe and learn how recreational virtual reality content could support refugees' mental health, and how this technology could be a pertinent tool for wider psychosocial support as offered forcibly displaced person in Europe. For refugees' mental health focuses on refugees in 3 different countries and different locations. These include Sheffield, United Kingdom, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Dublin, Ireland as well. The virtual reality project provides a recreational experience to refugees who have been victims of humanitarian crisis, the forcibly displaced people. This includes mindfulness and guided dance movement therapy sessions, music, comedy, virtual tour, work in nature like waterfalls, gardens, beach work, sport activities like table tennis, golf, and gaming, and a virtual tour of museums, gallery, heritage sites, even their home countries as well. The virtual reality project, is team-based, and this includes nature, space, travel and tourism, sport, and music making and dance, art making, relaxation, and meditation. We use different virtual reality applications to engage the refugees in these 3 different locations. We use Ilium, we use Trip, we use also YouTube to facilitate this recreational experience for all the participants. One of the findings that we had include this from one of the refugees who said that the participant expressed the 5 to 10 minutes using the headset took them away from the struggle, fear, and the pain they are experiencing in their refugee journey. They also expressed that this experience will stay with them as it was completely new to them, and they felt very lucky to be able to access this technology. All of them shared that they would like to do it again, and they will recommend others to try the virtual reality, to have a good time, play again, and experience something unique. One of the testimonials from one of the participants is this. She said, I used to play golf back home, but since I landed in Ireland, we are confined in these small rooms with no recreational spaces. I have developed a knee problem. I tried a brisk walk some months ago, and it provoked the pain in the knee, which I have never experienced before. Since I stopped my physical activities, I've been diagnosed with sugar diabetes, hypertension, and all of these in addition to the fibro surgery, which I'm waiting for the appointment next month. Today, I felt like I was taken back home when I was playing this game virtually. The next step was that we're focusing on one particular city in the United Kingdom, which is Sheffield. And the next phase of our project is the XR Hub for refugees in Sheffield, UK. And the aim is to serve multiple purposes, like facilitating narrative shift, providing therapeutic support, digital skills acquisitions, offering social and economic assistance, advocating for refugees' rights, and delivering collaborative learning initiatives. Our target audience are refugees and immigrants and asylum seekers between ages 15 to 60 for the support and for the IDEAT grant to be able to activate the virtual reality for refugees' mental health. And for more collaboration and partnership on the next phase of our project, which is the XR Hub for the refugees in Sheffield, please reach out to me.
Thank you very much. Another excellent presentation. We've got just about a minute or two left for questions, as I didn't stop people because I thought it was so interesting. I'm just going to make a comment about a couple of themes, and then if anyone wants to come in from the panel, they're very welcome. I mean, I think some of the themes for me that were important were about the importance around documenting cultural heritage, were around the importance of co-production. We've all talked about how, or we all know, some of us more than others, about experience when things are done to people or offered to people without actually listening to the people that are having things done to, who are actually the experts by experience and should be the ones in the driving seat. The other thing that came to me was the importance of thinking about what is called in academic language Cartesian dualism, which is when we think about how the body and mind interrelate. And I think in the West, we kind of tend to differentiate far more than we should do. And I think you've all shown how the two are so connected. And I would also add into that mix the importance of thinking about soul, or whatever word we want to add there. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything before I hand back to Veronica. I just want to thank an excellent panel. I've learned so much and hope to be in touch with all of you.
Thank you. I think I'll take your first point. So we have started really thinking about co-creation and how we all work together and who all of our stakeholders are. So we do have a group, a co-creation group, and that's made up of staff, board members, those with lived experience, and I think that's it. And artists as well. So anybody that has anything to do with our organisation are involved in this co-creation group. And what I found really interesting the other day in our meeting was Kwaku, who sang Hope to Humanity, Hope for Humanity. He brought up a really interesting point, just in the way the language that we use, like the word neutrality, and what it means to him. And if we're putting it in a document, then we need to like explain what that means, and also like non-biased. So we found, working with the refugees and asylum seekers and our artists all as one, we've got a better understanding on what the organization is able to do and how we should do it to make sure that everybody feels included. And we completely understand that, you know, it's the people we serve, that's who we need to find out how we can serve them best with what we do.
Thank you, Johanna.
I would like to make one point, which is, if most of you probably know that the majority of work being done for refugees is very much a top-down process. We come in, we give them what they need, they become dependent upon us. And what my organization was started for was the reason that, and I believe all of you as well hold this belief, that if you empower people themselves, they can heal themselves and they can create a better future, because it's within all of us. It's just a matter of giving them back their dignity and encouraging them to know that it is within themselves that they can rebuild. And so it's a very important point to notice that there has been a shift in aid relief and in work with refugees, that it becomes much more of a bottom-up process. And I think that when we can give and empower them, they can do the rest.
Thank you, Sarah. Should I hand back to you, Veronica, now?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
There was one thing that I was really keen, which is one of the reason for not for questions, was because both music groups were very keen to get together. And I wondered if just before we close, you want to expand about, because you mentioned it in the in our preparatory talks, and it was so exciting. I said, stop, talk about it now. So if you want to quickly mention it.
Yes, so just in brief, we're just putting together a 3-year project plan, looking for funding from the Arts Council and other organisations. And it's about how we empower our bands and those who are making music. And one of the things that we want to do is, I'm very into sort of like working with different organisations and partnerships. And so we would love to work with Music Action International and your crisis choir, because we believe that you will just elevate what we already do and the possibilities. And we want you to come on tour with us in 2026.
Well, this is brilliant. We will put you all in touch. Thank you, Rachel, for your brilliant sharing, your wise and knowledgeable sharing. And thank you to all our absolutely extraordinary speakers, and to Sarah from coming. Oh, sorry, Ramsey.
I just had one point, just going to the point about the caution with language. I think, just one point, which isn't to really criticize or shame or anything, but I think often the society thinks our role is to give people dignity and power, but they already have that. And I think our role is really to get society to realize that they're not recognizing that, you know, it's not something we're giving to the people. It's something that we need to shift socially and politically. But I understand that those words can just be a shortcut to the same thing. But so it's not to point blame.
Thank you. I wish we could be longer. Yes, Sarah.
Just to clarify, my point was that within us, we all have that dignity.
Yeah.
But it was to empower them to know that they have it within themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
it wasn't
really,
any. Yeah. It was just to bring that up as a thing.
It's really interesting, this dialogue. I do wish it could go on for longer. But also there was another one was about whether you use interpreters or not. And there have been so many different ways and different approaches. And you have been totally, totally brilliant. And thank you very much. I want to thank you very much. And now I should like to reintroduce Alex. We look forward to this project with real interest.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you to the previous speakers, all totally fascinating. And as Veronica says, it's a pity we haven't got longer to have more discussion, but we're going to move on now to another group of speakers. They all work together on something called Project Encounter. So I'll introduce them all at the beginning, and then they will talk about each talk for about 5 minutes about Project Encounter. And there may be a film I'm going to ask them to speak in the order in which I introduced them. They are Maria Aberg, Artistic Director of Project Europa, which is the host organisation for Project Encounter. Maria, I hope that's the right pronunciation for your surname. Maria is an award-winning director, performance maker and writer. She was born and raised in the south of Sweden and started her career at the Royal Court Theatre, working as an assistant director on several shows before making her debut with FX Kreuz's Stallerhof at the Southwark Playhouse in 2006. Since then, she has directed at the Royal Shakespeare Company, the National Theatre, the Royal Exchange, Donmar Warehouse and Theatre Royal Bath, amongst others. Internationally, she has worked at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm, Malmö's Stadstheater and at the Staatstheater Mainz. She was a judge for the 2017 Susan Smith Blackburn Prize and served on the board of Pentabus Theatre between 2015 and 2019. And Maria is an artistic associate at Mount View and an associate artist at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to start by saying what everyone else has said, which is a massive privilege to be here and to share a space with so many practitioners whose work I really admire. So thank you, Veronica, for inviting me. So my name is, I want to give a little overview of the company to contextualize this project encounter that we run, that Francisca and Angie will talk about in a minute. So my name is Maria. I'm the founder and artistic director of Project Europa. And we're a small charity and arts organization and a theatre company that makes work for, by and with first-generation migrants at the intersection of performance, participation and co-creation. And at the heart of our activity is the conviction that, that everyone can be an artist. And we offer a definition of an artist as anyone who pursues a creative endeavour over time with joy and rigour. We're a migrant-led organisation, which means that the leadership team, the artistic advisory board and the board of trustees all have lived experience of migration. And all our activity is focused on supporting the creativity of first-generation migrants, refugees and asylum seekers in the UK, amplifying marginalised voices and celebrating the multitudes of international perspectives which exist within our borders. So the work that we do breaks down roughly into 3 areas which all overlap and intersect. The first one is artist development. So we work to support migrant theatre makers to improve industry access and kind of give them opportunities to thrive in their careers. So for example, we run a mentorship scheme where we pair up emerging migrant theatre makers with senior, more established migrant talent and support them to build networks and to improve industry access for them at the beginnings of their career. We run micro commissions in partnerships with regional theatres around the UK, where we pay more established migrant artists to develop ideas for co-created work together with local communities, which serves both as a way of developing work that's grounded in place, but also to forge relationships between migrant artists and kind of leading cultural organisations around the country. And we run something called Practice Lab, which is a free skills exchange programme for migrant theatre makers. The second area is what we might call community engagement, for want of a better term. And this is where Project Encounter sits. So this is activity that is for people who have little or no previous experience of taking part in cultural activity. And the third area is our audience-facing work, so productions or exhibitions or anything that really happens in front of an audience. So as an example, last year during Refugee Week, I directed a project called Let Your Hands Sing in the Silence that was produced, co-produced with the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury. And that was performed by an ensemble that was a mix of community performers that had come through Project Encounter and professional performers. And a project we're developing this year is called Desire Maps, which is an interactive map-making performance where we invite audience members to reimagine the geographical journeys of their ancestors. And it looks at climate migration and the intersection between personal history and global events. And in addition to all of this, we've also recently started collaborating beyond the borders of the UK. So for this year's Refugee Week, we have helped to curate an exhibition of work that's facilitated by a grassroots NGO in Lebanon called the Araka Collective. And it is an exhibition of texts and images created by Palestinian and Syrian refugees and young Lebanese people. And that's exhibited at our base, which is Arc Cliftonville in Margate, which is a community arts centre in Margate. And we also organise conversations a little bit like this one, inviting international arts organisations and artists to talk about topics such as co-creation with communities or placemaking and festivals. So that's a little snapshot of what Project Europa does. So now you can hand over to the others.
Thank you very much, Maria. That's brilliant. That gives us the context for hearing now about the project itself. So I'd like to invite Dr. Franziska Stangl to come and talk now. She is a drama workshop director in Project Encounter, originally from Sweden. She is a clown, theatre maker and applied theatre practitioner. Her passion for working with young people and marginalised communities led her to co-create performances with refugees, asylum seekers and migrants, as well as with organisations such as Clowns Without Borders UK. She's a company director of award-winning ACA Theatre, who make witty and slapstick performances for young people, and works as a freelance performer, director, producer and facilitator. With a PhD in Elizabethan drama, Franziska is a guest lecturer at the University of Kent and frequently facilitates workshops in clowning, ensemble, lambda, classical theatre and physical theatre. Welcome, Franziska. Now, question to you. Do you want to show the film? Can you show the film, or shall we put that at the end if we have time?
I can share the film. If you want, maybe that's a good illustration of what it is that we are doing. Or if you, so I can talk about process, but if you want to see a visualization of what the work, maybe the film is good.
Well, why don't you talk now? Because I think we're quite tight on time generally. So let's see if we have time for the film at the end.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. This is a really wonderful symposium, and thank you for championing all this work of all these fantastic people. So Project Encounter is a 20-week drama workshop program that engages with migrant artists, migrants, refugees and asylum seekers based in Kent. We've just concluded the third iteration of the project this week, actually. So we met on Monday for our evaluation session. Each project has collaborated with Napier Barracks that we heard a little bit about before, but it's a refugee and asylum centre in Folkestone with men over the age of 18. And they spend around 70-80 days there before they get moved on to different housing, and that could be anywhere in the UK. So they are very much in a situation of transit and waiting. The aim of the workshops is to provide a platform for connection and a place for what Cornelius spoke about, this togetherness, this feeling of togetherness. It's also an opportunity to connect and reconnect with your creativity. And the participants have told us in our evaluation sessions that for them it's also an opportunity to experience some stress relief and to build confidence in the English language, as well as team building and public speaking. We work with interpreters, but also work with a lot of non-verbal activities such as games and physical theatre to kind of overcome language barriers. A bit about the approach. So each project centers around a theme, and this year the theme was what is change and what is transformation? Because we're all, as migrants, we share this fact that we've gone through this big change of changing home from one to another. So together we interrogated what is change and what is transformation over this 20-week project. And the project is normally divided into 4 phases. The first phase is about creating an inclusive space, a safe zone, and to build a foundation of the work that we then carry on with. The second phase is about devising and exploring more theatre practices and getting more confident in using them and working around the theme of the project. And then the third phase is about working towards a show, a sharing for an invited audience, where the participants also get an insight in how it is to set up a production. So we have a technical team, we have stage managers, we have lights, costumes, all of that. And the fourth phase is an evaluation session. As I said, we did the evaluation on Monday. The show became kind of a celebration of change. It stemmed from an exercise where each participant kind of plotted on this long piece of paper cultural events from their background and things that in a culture that they've experienced or come from, they celebrate. And what became clear is that most of us in the room and most of the cultures we have experienced celebrate these transformations or change, whether it's a change of government like Independence Days, or whether it's a change of seasons or like New Year. Most cultures had some kind of big celebration with dance, food, and coming together. So the performance reflected that in that it culminated in a big celebration with dance and music around this. We manipulated this big piece of paper to create a fire that they danced around. So it was really, really lovely. What becomes apparent from these workshops is this magic that happens when we as humans come together, and the willingness to connect across language and cultural barriers. And I think that this willingness is also something that strengthens the connection, really, because you have to work around, even if we work with interpreters, there's a lot of patience, there's a lot of understanding and curiosity about each other's cultures, and that is something that's been really, really magical to experience in the room.
Thank you, Francesca. That's wonderful. And some of these themes we'll try and pick up at the end around language and connection, but also the artistic development, which I can hear is very much an important part of your company. Okay, so our third speaker is Dr. Angeliki Varakis Martin, and she is from Kent University. So this brings in an academic perspective on this programme. She has worked at the drama department in Kent since 2007 as a lecturer in drama, and is responsible for coordinating the international exchange programme. She has ongoing research interest in the work of Greek theatre director Karolos Koun and his contribution towards the creation of a modern Greek tradition in the staging of Greek theatre. And she's exploring the applicability of various acting techniques to Greek theatre, with a special interest in masked acting. And I think that comes out, doesn't it, in this programme? So I'll hand over to you now, Angeliki.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm coming more from the university side of things, and I wanted to say that this year, and for the first time, Project Europa had chose to run their community workshops on a university campus. And we are grateful that they've chosen the University of Kent to do so, because through our collaboration with Project Encounter and their work with refugees, we see and we saw the immense potential that exists in linking research, teaching, employability initiatives to higher education civic mission, and to create a model of community work where arts education, academic research, and student experience informed by external engagement, such as volunteering and work experience, helps build bridges with vulnerable communities that are most in need of our support, such as refugees. So hosting Project Encounter on our campus and within our institution seemed to work well on many different levels. So the project gave the opportunity, first of all, for university staff, students, and refugees to interact and bond within a creative and entirely democratic, non-hierarchical context for a project which places refugees center stage, celebrating their cultures and languages. Hosting the project within our university meant that most of the support came from our student community, who brought with them their expertise, knowledge, and students came from various arts and humanities subjects and were at a different level of their study. They came from film and media, drama, And they acted as design assistants, stage managers, light and sound technicians, film crew, film editors, production assistants, interpreters, translators. And of course, our students gained valuable work experience through their active involvement, but this time in a meaningful and impactful project. And at this point, it is important to note that most of our students involved were from a migrant background themselves. And in this respect, we're particularly sensitive and attuned to some of the topics that were addressed in the workshops, and which had to do with being away from your country of origin, celebration, of course, of different cultures and languages, and being a non-native speaker. It also, and this is, I think, another really important aside to it, hosting it within the university, we found that it helped raise awareness within the refugee community about the opportunities to pursue further studies, to study art subjects. So participants were able to build relationships with staff and students and find out more about university life and opportunities to further their studies through conversations that occurred during our short breaks, before or after the workshops, but also walking and dining on campus. So this less formal interaction, in conjunction to the fun atmosphere of the workshops, inspired many of the participants to think about studying drama and film, but also made them more open to sharing their desire to further their education, because the academic environment appeared as a welcoming and a friendly place. Sometimes it could be intimidating when you're thinking of applying. So a result of this project, we're very happy to share the news that we already have one application from one of the participants to study drama at Kent, but we've also had other participants that are interested. So they were very, very inspired by the work of Francisca, by the workshops and the performance itself. And I think they've shared that with us. So I think that was great. Now, finally, and in addition to this series of workshops has initiated a participatory research project that was funded by the university and whose funds helped support the project. And in this project, all participants, the refugees, first-generation migrants, whoever participated, are acting as co-investigators in order to explore the ethics of working with and as part of a multilingual group of first-generation migrant and refugees in an applied theater context. And the output will be a film essay where all participants would have contributed, those who have agreed, of course, through reflecting critically on their experience. And the aim is for their views and thoughts, some of which are in the form of short self-recordings, so they're making the film as well, to help inform best practice for future creative projects that are similar. And of course, the film will be credited to all those who participated in the making of it. So all our participants have been performers, but they're also researchers.
That's wonderful. I think that's really fascinating, because I think one of the things that comes out of all of you speaking is the sort of what next question. What is the legacy? How does this work? What are the ripples of this work? And I think probably Maria, I don't know if the other two can come back on screen now and we could have 5 minutes of chat. I think that I'm right in saying that the work isn't finishing with this third phase, but you know, I know for all projects, the ongoing issue of getting more funding and so on means that it is likely to have to finish at some point. But as I understand it, also some of the participants are still in contact with you from previous phases. There's some peer-to-peer support that happens. I'd be interested in you all reflecting on what you see the future of this project being.
I can start. I think kind of connecting to something that Amir was saying really early on in those conversations earlier this afternoon about it being tailored to each, trying to tailor it to each individual. So that I think is largely what we try and do. But as an example, you know, there are several participants from our first round of Project Encounter in 2022 who are now members of our Artistic Advisory Board. So they're still deeply engaged with the organization. And like I said, several of the past participants also took part in this project that we produced last year during Refugee Week at the Marlow Theatre, where they were performing in a different project. So I think the kind of the legacy of people continuing to engage with the organization in whatever way they like or whatever way is appropriate for them is really clear.
I can just follow on from that. And something that's really lovely that's happened is that in the first iteration of the project, they began, it was participant-led, this WhatsApp group. And this WhatsApp group has now kind of grown over the last 3 years and has, I don't know how many members, but I think over 200 members. And this means that there is a network now of that peer support. And also what we find is that when, especially people from Napier Barracks, when they get transferred, either we can link them with other people who have transferred, or we can link them to other arts organizations, or sometimes they even come back and visit. So in this project, we had a participant who was part of the very first project who got reallocated and then has made their way to London, is now working in London, and he came to visit and participate in one of the workshops. And I think that kind of network and also connection for the newer arrived participants to see that there is a future, if you like, is something that is quite lovely, actually.
Yes, brilliant. And Angeliki, do you want to say anything on that question?
I think it's fascinating how this series of workshops creates a real true bond between people, and even if you have been or haven't, you're still part of that community, and that it's kind of almost ongoing. It seems to me when the participants did come to talk to us from previous performances and workshops, they felt that they had this responsibility to come and to talk and to share, and they were perfect role models and something to aspire towards. So it's kind of like it's a family that continues to grow, I would say. And I think there was one of our participants that had this recommendation that we should make a big poster in the evaluation where we all write, and this gets bigger and bigger and bigger about our experience as part of these series of workshops that happens every year, and hopefully will continue to happen for years to come.
That's fantastic. I mean, I do have another question. If we've still got 1 minute around language. I think that's come up a lot today around, and obviously the non-verbal communication that one associates with performance and music and so on, and whether or not people use interpreters. And I get the impression that the groups you work with have many languages. It's, you're not usually working with a single language group, are you? So is there anything about that you would like to reflect on?
Just quickly, I wanted to say that I think, like Francisca said, we do both. So there's both nonverbal kind of activity and communication, and we've got 1 or 2 interpreters per session. And I think one of the reasons that we did that, I suspect, was because we all have lived experience of being the person in the room who doesn't feel confident with the language. And what that does is that it often puts you on the back foot, and it often means that you might not participate as much as other people. You might not feel as confident to speak up. There is I think we all know what that feels like. And so I think for us, it was also important to make sure that if people don't have the confidence to speak up or don't have the ability, that there is someone else in the room who can do that for them.
Francisca, do you want to say something? Because I was just going to mention how fascinating it was when they worked with masks, which were silent. So no language needed, and they really came out of their shell, and they became super expressive and less self-conscious because it didn't matter anymore. And I think that came out in the feedback, that it really liberated them in a way, because that wasn't, I mean, one side of it, this kind of the silence didn't matter anymore. And also the fact that as the workshops progressed and we had bonded more, or those that were there for many workshops, it seemed to me that it didn't matter if we, it's just through like gestures were enough. And I thought that was really wonderful.
And there's a part of the, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, which came up earlier, that question of trust, of building trust, which is so critical, isn't it? Francesca, we have actually run out of time. Do you want one sentence, two sentences?
Well, it was just to say that it's something very bonding when you have to huddle over a Google Translate phone to try and work out what it is that you want to say alongside gestures and the rest. So I think we shouldn't, these what looks like barriers might actually be conductors for connectivity.
Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, well, we're obviously going to get the film, which we mentioned. Veronica said in the chat that can be circulated, so that's fantastic. And Angeliki, the evaluation or the research film will presumably be available in due course. So thank you all very, very much. That was really a wonderful introduction to your collective work. And I'm going to hand back to Veronica now to end the whole event.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Alex, for your tremendous chairing of the event. It's been such a privilege. And to the whole Project Europa Encounter team. It really has been, I was keen that you should have a bit of time at the end because of the legacy that your work is going to lead to. Thank you for coming. If you'd like to stay for a few more minutes to see the film, if Francisca wants to put it up, we can show it now.
My name is Francisca Stangel and I'm the lead facilitator of Project Encounter. Project Encounter is a collaboration between Project Europa and the University of Kent, and we are leading a 20-week community drama program for people with a migrant backgrounds, and that it can be people who've been here for 25 years or someone who arrived last week. We have done this project 3 times, and we have worked for all 3 projects with Napier Barracks, which is based in Folkestone, which is is accommodation and a centre for refugees and asylum-seeking men over the age of 18. And they stay at this centre for 70 to 80 days, and then they get transferred somewhere around the UK. You have people who come here via the small boats, and who are, I guess, lucky enough to make it over, but also have witnessed people who haven't made it over. So you get all of those scenarios, and sometimes they pop up during the sessions. We're not doing drama therapy, but we want to provide a safe space to explore these things.
This place helps people feeling people, feeling human, and just received this kind of energy and support that they don't give up, because it was with me.
There's something really lovely that happens in between the words when we don't rely on the same shared language, and we find similarities in other ways.
The interaction with other guys is amazing, because in the beginning for me I thought it would be very, very difficult. You know, when you can't understand each other, it's very, very hard, but I'm so surprised. It's easy. We understand each other. Then I really love it.
That's a really lovely thing for them, is this connection with other people. I think for the participants who come from Napier specifically, they often talk about the excitement of leaving camp, because they are in this camp for very many days. I feel really fortunate to be a part of this project. It's very life-affirming. You get so much joy because the participants bring so much joy, and you also...
How long does the film last?
Is often floored with the generosity of spirit that they bring, and it makes me remember why theatre is so powerful and important.
I can say that this project has changed a lot in my life, to be honest.
Thank you so much for sharing. It was worth the wait. And thank you, Alex. You've been totally wonderful, as indeed have all our speakers. And it's been a real privilege to host such an extraordinary people. I just felt that at a time of strife and conflict and all the awful things that are going on, it's amazing of you all to come and speak and listen. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.